I've seen men get shot over whiskey. I've seen boys die over cattle. But I've never seen silence do more damage than a gun. Until that day. Summer heat, thick as dust, hanging inside a jailhouse in Las Vegas, New Mexico. 3 men laughing, 1 girl struggling, and a sheriff sitting behind his own desk, pretending he didn't hear his own blood begging. That's not fear. That's something worse. That's a man who's already sold what mattered. The door creaked open. Bootsteps slow, steady, like they had nowhere else to be. The kind of steps a man takes when he's already made up his mind. He didn't scream, didn't rush. Just looked at what was left of the law in that room. Then his voice cut through the jailhouse. Stop, you bastard. The room didn't move right away. It held its breath, like even the walls knew something had just changed. Caleb Rourke stood just inside the doorway, dust on his boots, sun at his back, eyes already counting everything that mattered. He didn't look angry. He looked certain. That was worse. On the far side of the room, Evelyn Mercer lay pinned against her father's desk, her hands gripping the edge so tight her knuckles had gone pale under the dust. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, not from carelessness, but from being dragged across wood that had once held law books and ink. Now it held something else. Silas Pike stood over her, one hand resting easy near his Colt, like he owned the room, like he owned the town, like he owned the silence that kept everyone else still. Behind him, 2 men grinned in that slow, ugly way men do when they think no one will stop them. Near the back wall, Deputy Wade Harlan leaned by the door, watching Caleb with eyes that measured trouble instead of fearing it. And in the corner, behind that same desk, sat Sheriff Amos Mercer. His badge still shined. His hands did not. They trembled in his lap, empty, useless, already forgiven by the man wearing them. Caleb's eyes moved once across the room. He saw the shotgun leaning against the wall. He saw the lamp burning low, oil nearly gone. He saw Harlan's hand too close to his gun. He saw Pike's weight balanced, ready, but not yet committed. And he saw the girl. Not just her fear. Not just the way she struggled to breathe steady. He saw the moment something inside her had already started to break. Not from pain, but from knowing no one in that room had stood up for her. That was the part Caleb couldn't step past. One of Pike's men laughed and stepped toward him. You lost, stranger, he said, voice thick with easy confidence. Caleb didn't answer. The man reached out, grabbing for Caleb's coat. That was the wrong move. Caleb turned just enough, his hand catching the man's wrist, twisting hard, fast, no wasted motion. The man hit the floor with a sharp crack, air leaving his lungs in a sound that wasn't laughter anymore. The second man moved for the gun on the desk. Caleb's Colt cleared leather before the thought had fully formed. The shot cracked through the room, loud and final. The bullet didn't hit flesh. It hit the wood beside the gun, splintering it, sending the weapon spinning out of reach. That was the kind of shot men remembered. Silas Pike didn't flinch, but he did stop smiling. Now that's something, Pike said quietly, eyes narrowing as he studied Caleb for the first time. Harlan shifted by the door, tension rising, but he didn't draw, not yet. Outside, faint voices drifted closer. Someone had heard the shot. Someone always did. Pike knew it. Caleb knew it. And Pike still needed this town to believe there was law here. A dead stranger in the sheriff's office would raise questions, a scared girl, a quiet sheriff, and a threat by sundown. That was cleaner. The room had just gotten smaller. You don't belong here, Pike said, his voice calm, almost friendly, but carrying weight behind it. Caleb lowered his gun just enough, not surrendering, not escalating. Neither do you, he said. Simple words, but in that room, they landed heavy. Evelyn's breathing slowed just a little. For the first time since they dragged her in, someone had said something that felt true. Pike's jaw tightened. He glanced once toward the window, then back at Caleb. This wasn't the place he wanted to finish this, not with eyes gathering outside, not with a stranger who didn't scare easy. This ain't your business, stranger, Pike said. Caleb didn't even blink. It is now. Silence again. Thicker this time. More dangerous. Pike stepped back, just one step, enough to break the line, enough to change the moment without losing face. Girl's got something that belongs to me, he said, like he was talking business, not blood. She'll hand it over by sundown. His eyes locked on Evelyn. If she knows what's good for her. Then he turned, slow, deliberate, like a man who knew he could leave and still own the next move. His men followed, dragging the one who'd hit the floor. Harlan lingered a second longer, looking at Caleb like he was trying to remember something. Then he stepped out, closing the door behind him. The room didn't breathe again until they were gone. Caleb lowered his gun fully and stepped forward. Evelyn didn't speak. She didn't thank him. She just held on to the edge of that desk like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Caleb took off his coat and set it over her shoulders. Careful, steady, like she was something that could still be saved. Across from them, Sheriff Amos Mercer still hadn't moved. He stared at the desk, not at his daughter, not at Caleb, not at the door Pike had just walked through. Caleb looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, quiet, but sharp enough to cut, "You gonna sit there all day? Or you gonna remember what that badge is for?" Amos didn't answer, and that told Caleb everything he needed to know about this town. Evelyn finally lifted her eyes. They weren't just scared anymore. They were searching for something to hold on to, for something that still made sense. Caleb met her gaze, steady, unshaken. He wasn't promising anything. Men like him didn't do that. But he wasn't walking away either. Outside, the sun kept burning down on Las Vegas, New Mexico, like nothing had changed. But inside that jailhouse, something had already broken loose, and it wasn't going back in the ground. Because if a man could walk into a jail, drag a sheriff's daughter onto his own desk, and walk out smiling, then what exactly was left of the law in this town? Caleb didn't rush out of that room. Men who rushed usually missed something that mattered. He waited until the dust settled, until the voices outside drifted away, until the door stopped moving like it might swing open again. Then he turned back to the girl. Evelyn Mercer was still standing where he left her, his coat around her shoulders, her hands no longer shaking as much, but not steady either. She looked at him like she was trying to decide if he was real or just another kind of trouble. "That yours?" Caleb asked, nodding toward the badge on the desk. She followed his eyes and then shook her head slowly. "Not anymore," she said. It wasn't loud, but it carried more truth than anything said in that room so far. Caleb gave a small nod, like he understood something without needing it explained. He picked up a chair, set it upright, then sat down like a man settling in for a long conversation, not a quick favor. "You got something they want," he said. Evelyn didn't answer right away. She looked past him, toward where her father still sat, silent, shrinking into himself. Then she looked back at Caleb. "I didn't mean to," she said. That was how these things usually started. Nobody ever meant to. She told it simple. No long story, no wasted words. She helped her father with paperwork. That was all. Receipts, fines, names of men brought in drunk or angry. Normal things for a small town trying to pretend it had order. Then one night, she found something that didn't belong. A ledger that didn't match the rest. Different ink. Different names. Same handwriting, her father's. Caleb didn't interrupt. He just listened. "Money," she said. "More than he could ever earn, and not from the right people." She had copied a few pages, not the whole book, just enough to know it wasn't a mistake. That was why Pike dragged her into the jailhouse, not because he was drunk, not because he lost his temper, because he wanted the whole town to learn one simple lesson. Even the sheriff's daughter wasn't safe. If she held proof against him, names of ranchers, amounts paid, dates lined up with men getting arrested or losing land or disappearing quiet. And one name showed up over and over again. Silas Pike. Caleb leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing just a touch. That name didn't surprise him. It confirmed something. "What about him?" he asked. Evelyn swallowed. "He owns more than people think," she said. "Not just the saloon, not just the men you saw. He owns the quiet."
And if you're still here, friend, go ahead and subscribe, because stories like this only get darker before they tell you the truth.
That was a smart way to put it. Caleb almost smiled at that, but didn't. "So you copied it," he said. She nodded. And you hit it. Another nod, where she hesitated, not because she didn't trust him. Because once she said it out loud, there was no going back. Before she could answer, a chair scraped behind them. Sheriff Amos Mercer finally moved. Slow, heavy, like every step cost him something he didn't want to pay. You don't tell him that, Amos said. His voice cracked halfway through. Not strong, not commanding, just tired. Caleb didn't even turn around. That right, he said. Amos stepped closer, but not too close, like he knew he didn't have the ground to stand on anymore. You don't understand, Amos said. I was keeping things from getting worse. Caleb let out a quiet breath through his nose. He'd heard that before. Men always called it keeping the peace when they were really just keeping their pockets full. Evelyn looked at her father, and something in her face changed. Not fear, not confusion, clarity. You watched, she said. That's what you did. Amos flinched harder at that than he had at Pike. Caleb stood up slowly now. Not in a hurry. Never in a hurry. He walked past Amos like the man wasn't even there, then stopped at the door and looked back at Evelyn. You got until sundown, he said. That's what he gave you, she nodded. You planning to hand it over? No, she said. That answer came fast, faster than anything else she'd said. Good sign. Caleb gave a small nod again. Then we don't got much time, he said. He opened the door, letting the heat pour back in, along with the noise of the street, trying to act normal again. Before he stepped out, he paused. Just for a second. You did one smart thing already, he said without turning. Don't ruin it by trusting the wrong man now. Then he walked out into the sun. Evelyn stood there, coat still around her, heart still racing, but something else starting to take shape inside her. Not hope, not yet, but direction. Behind her, Amos sank back into his chair, smaller than before, like the badge on his chest had finally gotten too heavy to carry. Outside, Caleb didn't go far. He stopped just off the steps, eyes moving across the street, reading the town the way some men read a deck of cards, tracks in the dust, who was watching, who wasn't, who looked away too quick. This wasn't just about a girl and a ledger anymore. This was a town that had already made its choice. The question was whether anyone in it was willing to change it, and Caleb had seen enough towns to know how that usually ended. He rested his hand near his gun, not touching it, just close enough. Sundown wasn't far, and men like Silas Pike didn't make empty threats. The real trouble wasn't what Evelyn had seen. It was what Pike was willing to do to make sure nobody else ever saw it again. So the only thing left now was simple. Where had she hidden those pages? And who was going to die trying to get to them first? Caleb didn't head for the saloon. Didn't head for the sheriff's office either. Men like him didn't chase noise. They followed what didn't fit. He moved down the street slow, like he had nowhere to be, but his eyes were working the whole time. Dust on the ground told stories if you knew how to read it. Fresh wagon tracks, deeper than usual. Too heavy for just supplies, too recent to be old business. He crouched once, brushing his fingers along the edge of a track, then stood again without saying a word. East side of town, toward the depot. That made sense. Trains brought more than passengers. They brought money, guns, and men who didn't plan on staying honest. Behind him, he heard quick footsteps. Evelyn, she caught up, still wearing his coat, still holding herself together by something stronger than comfort. You're not leaving, she said. It wasn't a question. Caleb kept walking. Not yet, he said. That was enough for her. They didn't talk much after that, didn't need to. The town filled the silence, a man hammering wood too hard, a woman pulling her child closer as they passed, two riders at the far end of the street who stopped talking the second Caleb looked their way. Fear lived here. It just wore different faces. They reached the livery stable just as the sun started to dip a little lower. Shade stretched longer now, but the heat still held on. Inside, a boy no older than 15 was brushing down a horse, trying to look busy. He wasn't fooling anyone. Caleb stepped in, letting the smell of hay and sweat settle around him. Busy day, Caleb asked. The boy shrugged. Same as always. Now, that was a lie. Caleb nodded toward the back. Those wagons come through today. The boy hesitated. Just a second. Then he nodded. Couple of them. He said, came in fast, left empty. Empty wagons didn't ride that heavy. Caleb knew that. The boy knew it too. He just didn't want to say it out loud. Evelyn stepped forward slightly. Did you see who was with them? She asked. The boy glanced at her, then away. Didn't see much, he said, but his eyes said otherwise. Caleb didn't push. He didn't need to. He turned and walked out like he'd heard enough, because he had out back, near the fence line. The ground was softer. Tracks stayed longer there. Caleb followed them a few steps, then stopped. More wagons, more weight, more movement than a man like Pike needed just to scare a girl. This was bigger. It always was. Behind them, a board creaked, not loud, but wrong. Caleb turned just enough to catch it out of the corner of his eye. Too late for words. A man came out of the shadows, swinging. Caleb took the hit on his shoulder, rolled with it, and drove his fist straight into the man's ribs. Another shape moved near the gate. Then another. 3 total. Not counting the one already on the ground trying to breathe again. Evelyn backed up fast, grabbing a loose rail from the fence, holding it like she meant it. Caleb stepped forward instead. Always forward. One man rushed him head on. Bad choice. Caleb shifted, caught him off balance, and sent him face first into the dirt. The second one circled, slower, smarter, knife in hand. Caleb didn't rush that one, and he waited. Let the man make the mistake. He always did. When the knife came in low, Caleb turned just enough, but not clean enough. The blade caught his coat and cut shallow across his side. Caleb grunted, grabbed the wrist, twisted hard, and dropped him with one clean motion. The third man stopped moving, smart enough to see how this was ending. He raised his hand slightly. Don't need this, he muttered. Caleb stepped closer anyway. You're already in it, he said. The man swallowed, eyes flicking toward town, toward the depot, toward something he didn't want to say. Caleb saw it. That was enough. He didn't need the words. He let the man go. Fear would carry the message faster than pain. The yard went quiet again. Caleb pressed one hand to his side. Not bad enough to stop him. Bad enough to remind him he was still made of flesh. Just the sound of a horse shifting in the wind brushing through dry wood. Evelyn lowered the rail slowly, her hand still tight around it. You knew they'd be here, she said. Caleb shook his head once. No, he said. I knew something was wrong. He looked past her now, toward the far end of town where the tracks ran. Smoke in the distance, faint but steady. Train smoke. His jaw tightened just a little. They're moving something, he said. Something big. Evelyn stepped beside him, following his gaze. That ledger, she said quietly. It's not just money. Caleb nodded. No, he said. It never is. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched longer across the town. Sundown was getting close. And Pike wasn't the kind of man who waited around once the clock ran out. Caleb started walking again. This time faster, toward the depot, toward the smoke, toward whatever Pike thought was worth more than a girl's life. If they were right about this, then that ledger wasn't the real danger. It was just the key to something a whole lot worse waiting at the train yard. Caleb didn't slow down this time. When a man like him started moving with purpose, it meant he'd already put the pieces together. The depot sat on the east edge of Las Vegas, where the dust turned darker, and the air carried the smell of coal and hot iron. You didn't need a map to find trouble there. You just followed the noise. A train sat on the tracks, engine breathing slow, like it was waiting for something. Not passengers, something heavier. Caleb and Evelyn kept to the side, moving behind stacked crates and low fences. No rush, no talking. Just watching. Men were working the loading area. Too many for a normal shipment. Too quiet for honest business. Crates moved from wagons into the rail car, one after another. Fast, but careful. Caleb crouched behind a stack of lumber and watched the way they handled the boxes. Not like grain, not like tools. too cautious, too controlled. He glanced at Evelyn. She saw it too. "What's in them?" she whispered. Caleb didn't need to open one to know. "Something men kill over," he said. That covered most things in the West, but this felt bigger. They moved closer. One crate had been left slightly open, lid not nailed down all the way. Caleb eased it up just enough to see inside. Metal, oiled, clean. Rifles. More than a ranch needed. More than a town should ever see at once. Evelyn's breath caught. "That's not just for Pike," she said. "No," Caleb said. "It's for whoever's paying him." And that meant Pike wasn't the top of the chain. Just a piece of it. That made things worse. A lot worse. A voice cut through the yard. "Figured you'd come looking." Caleb didn't turn fast. He turned steady. Silas Pike stood near the rail car, one hand resting easy, the other hanging loose. Like always, he looked calm, too calm. Deputy Harlan stood beside him, and behind them, Sheriff Amos Mercer. Evelyn stiffened. For just a second, something in her face almost looked like hope. That didn't last. Amos didn't step toward her, didn't speak her name. He just stood there. Eyes heavy, like a man already tired of explaining himself. Pike gave a small smile. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said. Caleb didn't answer. He shifted slightly, putting himself just enough in front of Evelyn without making a show of it. Pike noticed. Men like him always did. "That girl's holding something that belongs to me," Pike went on. "Paper. Nothing more. Hand it over. We all walk away." That was the kind of lie that sounded simple. Caleb had heard it before. Too many times. "No," Evelyn said, clear. No shake this time. That got Pike's attention more than Caleb did. He looked at her differently now. Not like a victim. Like a problem. Sheriff Amos finally spoke. "Evelyn," he said, voice low, almost pleading. "Just give it to him." That hit harder than anything Pike had said. She stared at him, really stared this time. "You knew," she said, not loud, but sharp. "You knew what he was doing." Amos didn't answer right away, didn't deny it either. "I was trying to keep things from getting worse," he said. Same words, same excuse, just said in a different place. Caleb let out a slow breath. He stepped forward now. "Just one step, enough to pull the focus back. You already made it worse," he said. Amos looked at him like he wanted to argue, but there wasn't much left to stand on. Pike's patience wore thin. "You don't seem to understand your position," Pike said. He gave a slight nod. Men shifted behind the crates. More of them than before. Guns ready, but not raised yet. This wasn't a bluff anymore. It was a setup. Caleb saw it. He always did. "You ain't walking out of here with her," Pike said. Caleb glanced once at the rail car, then at the crates, then at the men. Too many to fight straight, too tight to run clean. So he didn't choose either. He moved. Fast. One shot, not at a man, at a lantern hanging near the rail car. Glass shattered, oil spilled across dry straw and old crate wood. A hot wind pushed through the yard at the wrong time, or the right one, depending on who you asked. Fire caught quick, too quick. Shouts broke the air. Men turned. Confusion did what bullets couldn't. Caleb grabbed Evelyn's arm. "Move," he said. They ran low, cutting behind the crates as flames licked up the dry wood. Smoke rolled fast, thick and choking. Horses nearby started to panic. Wagons shifted. Everything went loud at once. A shot cracked behind them, then another. Wood splintered near Caleb's shoulder. Close, too close. He pushed Evelyn ahead, guiding her through the chaos. They didn't stop until the yard dropped away behind them and the smoke swallowed the view. Only then did Caleb slow, just enough to breathe. Evelyn bent slightly, hands on her knees, catching air. "We didn't get the ledger," she said. Caleb shook his head. "Didn't need it," he said. She looked up at him, confused. "Yes, we do," she said. "That's the only proof." Caleb studied her for a second. Then something clicked behind his eyes. You copied it, he said. Not a question. She hesitated, then nodded. Not all of it, she said. Just enough, where Caleb asked. This time, she didn't hold back. Church, she said. My mother's Bible. Caleb looked back toward the rising smoke at the depot. Pike would put that fire out. Men like him always did, and when he did, he'd come looking again, harder this time, faster, meaner. Caleb turned back toward town. Then we go now, he said, because if Pike figured out where that copy was before they reached the church, this whole fight was already lost. Caleb didn't wait for the smoke to settle behind them. Men like Pike didn't stay confused for long. They ran straight through the side street, cutting past the quieter parts of town where people pretended not to notice anything. Doors closed a little faster. Windows didn't open. Las Vegas knew trouble when it passed by. It just chose not to get involved. The church sat near the plaza, low and worn, built from adobe that had seen more summers than most men in that town. It wasn't grand, but it stood, and sometimes that was enough. Caleb slowed as they reached the steps, not because he was tired and because this part mattered. Inside was quiet. Cooler. The kind of quiet that made a man think about things he usually kept buried. Evelyn moved ahead of him now. She knew exactly where she was going, past the first row of benches, past the altar, down to the side where the wood looked just a little older than the rest. She knelt, fingers working at a loose board. It lifted easy, like it had been waiting. She reached inside and pulled out a worn Bible, edges soft from years of use. For a second, she didn't open it. She just held it, like it still belonged to someone who wasn't here anymore. My mother's, she said quietly. Caleb didn't say anything. Some things didn't need words. She opened it slow, careful, pages thin, marked. And there it was, folded between two chapters. The copy, not long, not fancy, but clear, names, dates, mounts. And at the bottom of more than one page, Sheriff Amos Mercer. Caleb took a slow breath. That'll do it, he said. Evelyn nodded, but she didn't look relieved. She looked like someone who finally had proof of something she wished wasn't true. A sound came from outside, not loud, but wrong. Footsteps, more than one. Caleb's eyes lifted toward the door. Too soon. Pike moved fast, faster than expected. He stepped toward the entrance, hand near his gun, not drawing yet. No panic, just ready. Evelyn folded the pages back into the Bible, but her hands weren't shaking anymore. She was past that part. What now, she asked. Caleb didn't answer right away. He looked at the door, then at the windows, then back at her. If we run, they'll chase, he said. If we hide, they'll find us. That left one option, not the easy one, but the right one. We don't keep it secret, he said. Evelyn frowned slightly. What do you mean? Caleb stepped closer. We put it where everyone can see it, he said. That landed, not quick, but deep. Evelyn looked down at the pages again, then back at him. You're saying we show them, she said. Caleb nodded once. Out in the open, he said. No hiding, no deals. That kind of move didn't leave room for mistakes or second chances. Evelyn took a breath, long, steady, then she nodded. Okay, she said. That was all. No hesitation now. Caleb almost smiled. Almost. They moved fast. Out the side door this time, back into the heat. The town felt different now, tighter, like it knew something was coming. Caleb stopped by a small print shop near the edge of the street. An old man looked up from inside, eyes tired but sharp enough to notice urgency. We need copies, Caleb said. He didn't explain much, didn't need to. He laid the pages down and the old man read just enough to understand. His jaw tightened. Give me a minute, he said. Minutes mattered now. Every one of them. While the press worked, Caleb stepped back outside. He scanned the street again. More movement now. More eyes. Word was spreading. Fire at the depot. Strangers running. Something breaking loose. Evelyn stood near the door, watching him. "You really think this will work?" she asked. Caleb looked at her, then out at the town. "Doesn't have to work," he said. "Just has to be seen." That was the truth of it. In places like this, people didn't act because they didn't know. They acted when they couldn't pretend anymore. The old man handed over a small stack of printed sheets. Not many, but enough. Names clear. Ink still fresh. Caleb took them, then handed a few to Evelyn. "You ready?" he asked. She looked at the paper, then at the jailhouse down the street. Where it all started. Where it needed to end. She nodded. They walked together this time, not hiding, not running. Straight down the middle of the street. People noticed. Of course they did. A few steps closer, a few steps back. But no one stopped them. Not yet. The jailhouse came into view, and in front of it, Silas Pike, waiting, like he knew this was where it would all come back to. Sheriff Amos stood behind him, Deputy Harlan at his side, guns visible now. No pretending anymore. Caleb slowed just enough to take it all in, then kept walking. Evelyn moved one step ahead of him. That was new. That was important. She walked to the nearest post, pressed one printed sheet against the wood, and drove a bent nail into it with the butt of Caleb's knife. Then she turned back to the street, holding the other paper high, not shaking, not hiding. Pike smiled when they got close, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You should have run," he said. Caleb didn't answer. Evelyn did. "No," she said, and then she lifted the paper. Right there, in front of everyone. The street went quiet. Real quiet. The kind that only comes when people know they're about to hear something they can't ignore. And for the first time since this all started, Silas Pike looked like a man who might not control how this ends, because once those names were spoken out loud, there was no putting them back in the dark. The street didn't move at first. It held still, like every man there was waiting for someone else to decide what came next. Evelyn's voice broke that silence. Her voice wasn't loud, but it held steady. She read the names, one by one, dates, amounts. Deals made in the dark. Deals signed by the man who was supposed to protect them. People shifted, some stepped back, some stepped closer, but no one could pretend anymore. That was the difference. Silas Pike's smile faded slow. Not fear, but something close to it. The kind of look a man gets when control starts slipping through his fingers. Deputy Harlan reached for his gun first. Men like him always did. Fast hands. Slow thinking. The shot cracked through the street. Caleb was already moving. He didn't fire wild, didn't fire angry, on just one clean shot. Harlan's gun hit the dirt before it ever cleared leather. Pike stepped back, reaching for his own Colt. But this time, the street didn't belong to him anymore. Not completely. At first, nobody moved. That was the honest truth about fear. It doesn't leave a man all at once. Then Tom Whitcomb stepped out from the crowd. One rancher, just one. Then another man took off his hat and stepped beside him. Then another. Men who had stayed quiet too long. Men who had paid too much already. They didn't need to be heroes. They just needed to stop being afraid. Pike saw it. That shift. That moment when fear changed sides. He drew anyway. He was fast. Caleb was older, tired, and bleeding a little under his coat. But he was calmer. And calm beats fast more often than young men like to admit. Caleb saw Pike's eyes flick toward the alley before his hand moved. That was the tell. Pike wasn't fighting for the town. He was fighting for a way out. Caleb fired once. Quick. Clean. Pike dropped into the dust, his Colt falling beside him. The kind of ending that doesn't need to be explained. And with him went the hold he had on that town. Not all at once, but enough. Sheriff Amos took one step toward Evelyn. For one breath, it looked like he might finally choose his daughter. Then his eyes dropped to the paper in her hand, to his own name. To the price of every lie he'd told Evelyn, he said, but there wasn't enough father left in his voice. He didn't run, didn't fight. He just stood there, looking at that paper like it weighed more than any gun ever could. No one had to tear the badge off his chest right then. Everyone could already see it didn't belong there anymore. She didn't look at him the same way anymore. Not angry, not even surprised. Just done. And sometimes that's worse than anything else. By the time the dust settled, the town looked the same buildings, same street, same sun hanging low over everything. But it wasn't the same place, because now people knew. And once you know, you don't get to go back to pretending. Caleb stepped off to the side, the way men like him usually do, watching, letting the town decide what it wanted to be now. Evelyn walked toward him after a while, not rushed, not unsure, just steady, like someone who had lost something, but found something else in its place. "Thank you," she said. Simple, honest. Caleb nodded once. "That was you," he said. Not false humility, just truth. She held his gaze a second longer than before, then looked out at the town. "It doesn't feel like a victory," she said. Caleb let out a slow breath. "It's not," he said. "It's a start." Evelyn looked at the coat still resting on her shoulders. It was dusty now, torn a little, too big for her. But she didn't take it off. "You ever planning to tell me your real name?" she asked. Caleb looked toward the depot, then back at her. For a long time, he didn't answer. Then he said, "Caleb Rourke." She nodded, like she was saving it somewhere safe. "Well, Caleb Rourke," she said. "This town might need a man who remembers what law's supposed to feel like." He almost smiled. Almost. And for a man who'd spent years being nobody, that was more than a small thing. That's the part most people don't talk about. The West wasn't built on perfect ending. It was built on men and women deciding, one day at a time, not to look away anymore. Caleb turned slightly, eyes drifting toward the edge of town. He could leave now. No one would stop him. No one would expect him to stay. That was the life he knew. Evelyn didn't ask him to. Didn't need to. Some things don't have to be said out loud to be understood. And maybe that's what stayed with him the most. Not the fight. Not the guns. But the moment someone finally chose to stand when it would have been easier to stay quiet. Now let me tell you something. Just between us. I've seen a lot of stories like this over the years. Different towns, different names, same choices. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Trouble doesn't win because it's stronger. It wins because good people get tired of standing alone. So here's a question for you. If you were standing in that street that day, would you have stepped forward or looked away like everyone else had been doing? And another one. What's something in your own life right now that you know isn't right, but you've been telling yourself it's not your fight? Because sometimes the difference between the life you have and the life you want is just one moment where you decide to stop staying quiet. If this story gave you something to think about, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you still believe stories should mean something, subscribe and stick around. I've got more of these to tell. Stories about men who made the hard call and what it cost them. This story was gathered, retold, and shaped with a few added details. So the lesson, the feeling, and the entertainment could come through stronger. The images are AI made for illustration, and the title and thumbnail are meant to carry the emotion of the story in a clear, dramatic way. If you felt something from it, let me know down in the comments. I read more of those than you'd think, and I picked the next stories with that in mind. Because at the end of the day, these stories aren't really about the past. They're about choices, and those don't ever get old.